We are just over 24 hours away from the 2024 NFL Draft, and I, for one, am so excited to see this finally come to a conclusion, as we've been spending months speculating, putting mock drafts together, hearing rumors, seeing guys fall, seeing guys rise. It's all coming to this. Now, just a day before the NFL Draft, I wanted to put together my first full and only round one mock draft. So I put the GM hat on for all 32 teams, or 31 teams, I guess, in this case, because we're missing the Browns, I believe. But nonetheless, took a look at the first round, included some crazy trades, really, and had a prediction that I've kind of changed my mind on a little bit as it pertains to the quarterback situation for the first round. So regardless if you're a Tennessee Titans fan or not, welcome to the All Things Titans channel. I'm your host, Jonathan Miller. I appreciate you guys for watching this one and sticking around. This one's going to be a lot of fun to dive into. So before we jump in, just want to kind of set the stage a little bit for what I believe will be the first round of tomorrow's draft. Now, there are a lot of common picks here, but there are also quite a bit of shakeups. I have 6 quarterbacks taken in the first round. I have some players falling late in the first round that some people will probably say you're an idiot. And then I have a couple of players drafted early that fell that should be surprises to people who are not me. And to be completely honest with you, who knows? Tomorrow is going to be a complete shakeup. There's going to be plenty of surprises, plenty of things we didn't expect. And when teams go on the board, things change, right? So you can never properly, fully predict it. But I used logic. I looked at every single roster for every team selecting and really dove deep into what I believed would be the best pick or the best trade scenario for that team. And a couple of teams missed out. I'm going to be honest with you. One team in particular being a team that they probably didn't love the pick, still got a really great player, but just missed out on some of their top guys, which is going to happen tomorrow as well, by the way. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump in to my one and only full first round mock draft. I always get tongue tied when I try to say that. So taking a look here, you guys might notice a couple of surprises. Quite a few trades. Let's see, I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 trades, I believe. Something like that. And they all came towards the top of the draft. So before I dive into the players, I'm going to explain the logic on all these picks. But essentially, we have the Vikings win on the clock, end up getting their guy, which is really exciting. We'll dive into that one. In combination of the first trade for the Patriots, are able to parlay that into another trade. Instead of trading down, they trade back up and get their guy. And then we have a surprise trade in this scenario. Since J.J. McCarthy is taken, the Denver Broncos say, screw it, let's go get our guy. And they trade with the Titans to trade up to 7 to take Michael Penix Jr. So the first surprise of the draft really coming at number 7, or maybe even 5, I would say. We'll see. I think a lot of these scenarios have been predicted, but pretty exciting nonetheless. The Chargers end up trading back up as well after a trade down with the Patriots, taking Brock Bowers, and then of course Chicago picking up some more picks in the draft, which they desperately need, and still getting the best edge rusher in the class. So that's exciting. And then Bo Nix, the 6th quarterback in the top 15, going to the Raiders. So I'll talk about that one as well, because there's a ton of logic that goes into that. And so I'll let you guys just kind of peruse this really quickly as I jump into the obvious, which is the first and second pick. I believe Caleb Williams and then Jaden Daniels. I've been back and forth. I'm really high on Drake May. And before I dive into this fully, I need everybody to understand that this mock draft is not necessarily what I would do. It's more predictive, like what I think these teams and how the board falls and how that changes for them. This is kind of me trying to predict what I think will happen in the first round, not necessarily what I would do. Because if I'm being honest with you, the Titans sitting at 7, I would have a really, really hard time not only passing on Joe Alt, but also passing on Rome Odunze, which I'm a little higher on taking the receiver in this case. I've been on record for that, but they pass on both of those guys and they opt to trade down and add some value, which is, I think, probably high on their board. But who knows? Who knows? That's just what I think could happen. but this could all be wrong, guys. But anyways, let's jump into it. So the first two picks are very much consensus, I think. I think there's a good chance that Drake Maye could end up being the pick number 2 for the Commanders, but in this scenario, I think they're just going to go ahead and lock that in. I think they like Jayden Daniels' ceiling. He had a phenomenal season last year, and I think that he'll be able to kind of carry that over. I think the biggest knock on him, at least in what his game was last year, is that he started really slow and then got better over the time, which I don't think is a knock necessarily. Some people try to like knock him for how he started, but it's like, okay, well, he got better as the game, as time went on, and that's what you want players to do, especially your quarterback. But I think the biggest knock on him is his size, maybe his durability in a league that is more physical than the college game. Other than that, he's rock solid. He's great in a lot of categories, so I think that's the Commanders love that, and they're gonna go with that. Now, this is the first tricky thing that happens in my mock draft, and I think it will be the case in real life as well for the Patriots, is that the Patriots have to decide who they prefer at quarterback first. Now, obviously, they're only going to get a chance to take either the third best or fourth best quarterback, or third best in their eyes. Maybe it's J.J. McCarthy, right? Which is what I have in this scenario. I think there is probably something there between J.J. McCarthy being a Michigan guy and Tom Brady and the history that Tom Brady has with the Crafts. I think, who knows? Maybe they got in their ear and said, hey, you guys could probably afford to trade back, get a bunch of capital, and then use that to get your real guy. And I think that in my scenario, the Patriots end up doing that. But for the Patriots, they can just take Drake Maye in this scenario, have their quarterback, and move on. They have an early second-round pick. They have good capital in this draft, so they can build around Drake Maye pretty easily, I think, and also add to that defense, which they desperately need to do. But overall, I think the Vikings, what I came to a conclusion of is I think the Vikings, they have to have their guy. And in the dual mock that I did with my friend Dalton, which you guys won't get to see in video form because the stupid file corrupted twice on me, which I'm really upset about. But in our dual mock, we had Michael Penix getting drafted 11 to the Vikings, which I think is very possible. It's very possible the Vikings are like, okay, this is not worth it. They don't have a second-round pick next year. They don't have a third-round pick this year. They have holes in their draft resources. So I think that is problematic for them. So for them to have to send, 3 first-round picks plus, they don't really have the plus to give. Because if they give their third-round pick and their first-round pick next year, then they don't draft in the first 3 rounds at all after taking a rookie quarterback. Just doesn't sound very smart to me. So I think in this case, they find a trade package that works where they bundle those 3 first-round picks and then send a number of later-round picks. I think I have them taking a 4th, and I think that I have them taking, getting like a 4th next year and like a 5th this year, something along those lines. But I think what happens is that they end up getting the trade done. They agree to that compensation. The Patriots are okay with doing that because in their eyes, they're like, well, look, we're going to still get our guy, and we're going to add crazy capital in the first round of this draft and first round next year, so can't go wrong. So with that trade, the Vikings get their guy. Drake Maye is the pick. And then we move on to pick number 4. Now, Monty Austin-Fort and the Cardinals have been the most verbal about wanting to get a trade done. I think the problem is that Monty is biting off more than he can chew. There was a report that they were like, the trading into 4 starts with 3 first-rounders and plus, which, is obvious. Like, we get it. The value for the quarterbacks and the wide receivers in this draft is very high. So I don't necessarily blame him for saying that, but to me, I think it's going to turn teams off, and they're going to look at other suitors in that area, like the Patriots or the Chargers, for example, or the Titans, are all going to be probably interested in trading down. So, trading down. So worth it for them. So in this scenario, they're like, okay, cool. We still get arguably the best player in the draft, Marvin Harrison Jr., absolute gold jacket kid. He's going to be a stud. We'll give them a true dominant wide receiver 1, which they desperately need for Kyler. And I think that it makes your team a whole lot better. And they don't have to trade down. They have plenty of capital that they've acquired. So in that Houston trade last year, and they're set up. They're good. So they take Marvin Harrison Jr. No need to spend much time on that. Malik Neighbors to 6 to the Giants. I know a lot of people think that the Giants are interested in a quarterback if J.J. McCarthy. Oh, sorry, I'm jumping ahead. So sorry. a much bigger thing. The Chargers picking a number 5, of course. I looked right over the Chargers. And that's because I already talked about it. The Patriots are going to be trading back up. So the Patriots, they have pick 11. They have pick 23. They have pick 121 from the Vikings, I believe. They got future capital. They're in a great spot. So they essentially say, okay, we want to trade back up with the Chargers. And I have the draft compensation, but of course, here we go. So the Patriots in this scenario, so let me go over these trade details for the compensation. So for the 3rd overall pick, we have the Vikings receiving the 3rd overall pick, and they're sending to the Patriots pick 11, pick 23, pick 129 this year, which is a 4th rounder, and then a 25 first and 4th. So it's 3 first-round picks, 2 4th-round picks, and that's the bundle. That's the trade compensation. Now for the Patriots and the Chargers, the Patriots trade back up to number 5 to go get their guy JJ McCarthy, and they send pick 11, pick 34, which is the top of the 2nd round this year, pick 103, which is the top of the 4th round this year, and a 2nd overall pick next year in 2025. So the Chargers swap 5 and 11. They pick up another pick in the 2nd round at the top of the 2nd round, which, by the way, gives them like 3 picks in the top 40 or 50. So this is an absolute cook for the Chargers. This is a big-time trade for them. I love it, to be honest. I think it's worth giving up a Neighbors or a Joe Alt in this case. And then they pick up a 2nd next year as well. So the Patriots trade back up. They have the wiggle room to do it, and they take their guy. Going to pick 6, we have Malik Neighbors to the Giants. I do not believe the smoke that's around drafting J.J. McCarthy or a quarterback in this scenario. They paid Daniel Jones far too much money. I do think they want I do think that they want a quarterback here. I just don't know that you trade up or that you use the 6th overall pick to do so. I think they take arguably the best receiver in the draft. You know, you could argue that he's better than Marvin Harrison Jr. in a lot of ways. Regardless, they take one of the best players in the draft in Malik Neighbors. It instantly makes their offense better. They finally get a stud number 1 receiver, which again, this team desperately needs. And if you want to see if they want to give Daniel Jones one more year, which is kind of what it seems like they're doing, then you got to give him some weapons. They are starving for weapons. And you lost Saquon Barkley. This offense is in a really, really rough spot. And if you pass on taking one of the best offensive players in the draft, I think that's a huge mistake. So they go Malik Neighbors. Easy. Boom. Moving on. Now, Tennessee, moving back. If you watched my video, my 7-round mock for the Tennessee Titans, then you already know kind of what this looks like. Again, I'll go over it. The Denver Broncos and Sean Payton are like, we got to go get our guy. We can mold, Michael Penix into a star receiver or a star quarterback in this league. He's got all the talent to do so and would have a great mentor in Sean Payton to help him along the way. So Denver trades up. They don't give up a whole lot. I think it's fairly fair compensation for Tennessee. I mean, it's borderline better for the Broncos, but they give up. Denver obviously receives the 7th overall pick. The Titans receive pick 12. They get pick 76 this year, which is a 3rd-round pick. They get pick 121, which is a 4th-round pick this year. And then they also get a 2025 2nd-round pick. So Rand Carthon gets to make up the compensation of the 3rd-round pick he sent to the Chiefs for L'Jarius Sneed and fills that hole that he had in his draft capital. He also gets to pick up a 3rd-round pick this year and a 4th-round pick this year, a 3rd-round pick of which the Titans do not have. And there's considerable holes still in the roster that they now get to fill with cheap rookie talent. So I think it's an okay trade for them, especially if they can land one of their guys, which to me, they have a hard decision in this case. Do they pass on Rome Odunze? Do they pass on Joe Alt, who's, undoubtedly the sure thing at left tackle? I think they do, and I hope they don't. Let me say it that way. If it were me, I wouldn't. But I think in this case it makes sense because no matter which way you slice it for the Tennessee Titans, they have 3 to 4 tackles that are absolute upper echelon guys that they could plug in and would be a successful draft for them in the 1st round. They have a handful of receivers that could do the same thing. So there's really 7 players to 8 players in the 1st round that I think would be big time home run picks. They would be home run prospects if the Titans were to land them. So if that's the case, if you can move back 5 spots, and still acquire one of those players, then and add draft capital, which you desperately need in 2024 this year, that allows you to fill more holes and kind of get a faster track of this rebuild for Brian Callahan and for his staff to kind of get some more talent. So they do that. They trade back. Michael Penix is the pick for the Broncos, and we move on. This pick is not consensus. I have the Atlanta Falcons taking wide receiver Rome Odunze. A lot of people have Dallas Turner here. I think he's widely mocked. They need a good edge rusher. He's the best one in the class, arguably. It's very cut and dry for many people, and I was thinking that way for a long time. But when I really dove into their roster and what they've done in the offseason, the Falcons went out and dropped an absolute bag on Kirk Cousins. You have Kirk Cousins, who is on a clock, right? Maybe a 2-year window for Atlanta, really, and realistically, as far as Kirk Cousins' talent goes. And they have to they are building their roster kind of in a win now situation. They're in a division that they could very easily win. I mean, the entire division's kind of like on the ropes a little bit here. So they go out and they add a stud wide receiver to pair with Drake London, to pair with Kyle Pitts, to pair with some of the other talent that they've got around him. And I think there's a clear need for wide receiver 2. I would argue wide receiver 1 over Drake London for this offense. And then you just kind of double down and get this offense humming, get it back to where it needs to be. So I think Rome Odunze is the pick here. Rome Odunze is an absolute stud. Again, he's the 1A, 1B, 1C for this top 3 receiver trio here. I think it's a slam dunk pick, and I think that it makes a bigger impact for this Falcons offense that desperately needs to kind of take the next step. And I think that adding Kirk Cousins, adding Rome Odunze to an already, a solid talent pool of young players. You got Bijan back there who had a really successful rookie campaign. Hopefully he takes a step in his sophomore year. And then you're humming, hopefully. So pick number 9. This is the next trade that we have here for the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears desperately need more capital. In this case, they could draft Brock Bowers. They could draft Dallas Turner. They could go a lot of different routes, right? They could go corner if they wanted. They could do a lot of things. But to me, what makes the most sense is to add draft capital, and I think it's very clear that Ryan Poles needs to do that. I think if Rome Odunze slid past Atlanta, they would just consider taking him, and it's like, cool, this is a slam dunk for our offense. But I think in this case, they're going to trade down just a couple spots, nothing crazy, and they're going to trade just for a couple picks. So they're going to send pick 9 to, the Chargers are going to send pick 11 to the Bears, in addition to pick 103, which is a 4th-round pick, and pick 181, which is a 6th-round pick. So the Bears pick up a 4th and a 6th this year, which they do not have. Actually, as a matter of fact, I think they have 3 picks, and one of them is a 4th-round pick, but they need that capital. They're only moving down 2 spots, so they're not going to get any type of, serious compensation. And to be honest with you, I think that the Chargers would be okay with sticking, because if they would land Joe Alt or a tackle at 11, then I think they'd be fine with that ultimately, since, those receivers are gone. But anyways, Chicago's like, yes, please give us some stuff. We need some more picks. So they move up. The Chargers move up to take Brock Bowers. This is not controversial in any way. Brock Bowers is undoubtedly a top 10 talent. I think he's better than we're giving him credit for. I think he's a better player. I think the Kyle Pitts pick a couple of years ago really soured the taste of premium tight end picks in the NFL draft. So unfortunately, Brock Bowers, not the beneficiary of that scenario. But nonetheless, Bowers to number 9 is a slam dunk for the Chargers. It adds a much, much needed weapon to the Chargers offense for Justin Herbert with the exit of his top 2 receivers in Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. So a much needed talent and weapon on the offense for the Chargers. Number 10, this is the team I was talking about earlier where it's like this team just missed out. The Jets have the opportunity to potentially trade up to 7 with the Titans. I don't think they quite have the compensation or are willing to give the compensation that the Broncos were willing to give. Who knows? I think that trade could actually make sense. If Tennessee is saying okay, we're not going to draft Rome and tackle is the plan, then I think trading with the Jets actually makes a ton of sense, because then the Jets can come up and snag Rome. because I think something that's not getting talked about is that the Falcons' interest in Rome Odunze or a receiver, one of these three receivers. And also you have teams like the Steelers, you have teams like the Jaguars, you have a couple of teams who are wide receiver needy. I mean, Indy potentially. You have teams who are wide receiver needy that are probably willing to have a conversation about what a trade up would look like. So I think while that could still happen in my scenario here, the Jets just kind of miss out. And they're like, you know what? It's not the worst thing. I think on their list of priority happenings for the draft, it would be, you know, one of the receivers, Brock Bowers, kind of in that top range. And then Joe Alt is like option 4 or 5. So they still get a great guy, a great talent. Their offensive line is in a weird spot because they just signed Tyron Smith, who probably likely only has 1 year in him left, maybe 2 years, depending on how the health kind of holds up. And who knows? I mean, he's injury prone, so there's a good chance he could get hurt, and then Joe Alt's just plugged in. But having Joe Alt not start on that line is kind of hard to believe. Maybe you move him to right tackle and he plays, or maybe he doesn't for the year and he just kind of sits back and learns under Keith Carter, the Hall of Fame offensive line coach, Keith Carter. That's a joke. That was for all my Titans fans. But they take Joe Alt, and that's the future of the left tackle position. It's just not an immediate impact today, which is probably not what the Jets were hoping for, picking 10th in the draft. So moving on, slam dunk pick for the Bears. They're able to move back, acquire a couple more picks, and still get the best edge rusher in the class. Dallas Turner's just going to fall to 11 to the Chicago Bears. The Bears are ecstatic with that pick. Going on to pick 12, Oluminyu. I say this perfectly when I'm not recording a video, and of course when I go to record it, I butcher it. Olu Fashanu is the pick for the Tennessee Titans. Now, there's a lot of smoke around the Titans, you know, a day before the draft. Now, J.C. Latham has picked up steam, and who the Titans really like, they're thinking that, you know, that could be offensive tackle 2 for the Titans. They really like him. I'm not really buying it. I do like J.C. Latham. I do think he's very talented, supremely talented. I just like Olu Fashanu a little bit more. I also think that he is an easier plug and play at left tackle, whereas JC kind of has to go through that transition, which, you know, I'm sure he'll do fine. I think he's probably very capable of playing left tackle, but for me, I like Olu better, so I went Olu Fashanu here. I still think Olu could be a top 10 pick, and I think there's a really good chance that he still is tomorrow, but I have him go here to the Titans. So the Titans pick up extra draft capital. They get their left tackle of the future. Easy peasy. Moving on. Bo Nix is the pick here. 6 quarterbacks taken in the first round, which personally, I think this happens every year. A ton of quarterbacks get mocked in the first round. I think back in 2020 or 2021, I can't remember which draft it was for Malik Willis and Kenny Pickett in that draft class, but there were mock drafts that had 3 or 4 of those guys taken in the first round. That was not the case. Kenny Pickett was the only guy. And to be honest, he shouldn't have been. So here we are. So, but I think this is a little bit different. I think these quarterbacks are a little bit more advanced. They've obviously, guys like Michael Penix, guys like Bo Nix have played a billion years in college. They have a ton of experience. They have production as well, which is another big part of it. I think the Raiders, I was weighing a corner. I was weighing Quinion Mitchell here or Bo Nix, and I just couldn't find myself to pass on the quarterback because Bo Nix is really the last quarterback in that tier. And I think that the Raiders, you know, you have Gardner Minshew, you have Aiden O'Connell. These are guys that are they're Band-Aids for your quarterback position. And maybe the Raiders' plan is to not be good next year and to take a top quarterback next year. That could make sense. Or maybe they're one of the teams that are fighting to trade up with Tennessee, for example. I just don't know how aggressive they're going to be. Tom Telesco has been kind of unpredictable in what he likes to do. They've said publicly that they'd be willing to trade up. I just don't know if it's for sure going to happen. So I have them taking Bo Nix here because I think worst case scenario, you get the 5th-year option on a quarterback who definitely could work out for you. Bo Nix doesn't have to play. Gardner Minshew can lead the team all next season. Bo can just sit back, learn the offense, learn the NFL game and pacing, get used to it, and then come out the following year and do his thing. So Bo Nix to the Raiders at 13. Number 14, we got J.C. Latham, which is the 3rd best tackle in the class, in my opinion. Going to the Saints that desperately need tackle help. They had Ramczyk, which I believe had a serious offseason injury. I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that, but I think he had they have issues at both tackles, essentially. and they need some help. So J.C. Latham can come in. He can play right tackle for them. He could potentially play left tackle for them. It makes a ton of sense. The Saints don't have to trade up. They're still getting a very talented player who, has top 10 potential at talent, to be completely honest with you. But I think 14 is a good spot for J.C. Latham, in my opinion. Pick 15, Indy. People are saying they're going to trade up for Marvin Harrison Jr. They're going to trade up for a receiver. Spoiler alert, Chris Ballard likes his draft picks. This is coming from a Titans fan, guys. Chris Ballard does not trade up. Now, do I think that there's a chance that this could be the year where he's like, screw it, I got to trade up. I don't have a choice. I think there's a really, really good chance that could happen. Because if this year goes poorly, like maybe Indy finishes like last in the division, then I think there's a good chance that he could be out of there. So in a last-inch effort to be relevant in a very relevant AFC South where a lot of moves have been made this offseason, there's a chance he could trade up for Bowers or maybe for like a Rome Odunze or somebody, and that would be dynamic. That would be great. But in this case, he keeps his picks. They have a draft strategy where they're going to use all their picks to try to add talent. They re-sign all their players. I don't think it's a bad strategy at all. So they get to stay and pick who I think is the best corner in the draft that falls to him. Quinyon Mitchell gets to go outside and let Kenny Moore be that more versatile guy who kind of works in the slot and kind of bounces around. Paired with Brent Grimes, I think they have a good, solid starting trio there in Indy. Jared Verse to Seattle. I've seen some different mocks for the Seattle Seahawks where they take like a defensive tackle or somebody like that. They have a guy, I think it's Jaron Reed, who was productive last year. He had like 7 sacks, I think like 45 total tackles, something like that. For a nose tackle, he was productive. Like he wasn't a nobody. So I don't think they necessarily go like Byron Murphy or somebody like that here. I think they do want to add some talent on the defensive line, and that's why I think they go with a guy who was mocked as like a top 5 edge rusher, the top 5 player for a long time before the season got underway, and he didn't necessarily do anything that didn't deserve still a top 15-ish pick in the draft. And so to me, they add some crazy talent in Jared Verse to the edge and continue to build on that defense, which is sneakily good in Seattle right now. Pick 17 was very tough. It was very tough because deep down, I believed that the Jaguars have a bigger need in their secondary. But as I analyzed their roster, I started to realize like they got some pretty decent production from some of their safeties and some of their corners, young players who they've drafted that are doing all right. So I think that they could go Terrion Arnold here, and I was kind of going back and forth. Cooper DeJean also a very strong possibility here. But because the entire time I'm thinking these Jag fans are going to get so hyped about me taking Brian Thomas Jr. for them. And sure enough, that's where I landed. So the logic behind taking Brian Thomas Jr. in this scenario for me is that they have a ton of money tied up in the wide receiver room right now. And the more I thought about it, you add a talent like Brian Thomas Jr., who is undoubtedly a first-round pick. He's wide receiver 4 to me, in my opinion. He's fantastic. He does a lot of things really well. He stretches the field. He can do all that. And so I think that he's a good running mate for Gabriel Davis, who they just signed, but also a ton of money tied up with Christian Kirk, a ton of money tied up with Gabriel Davis. Zay Jones is probably not going to be there much longer. And if he gets hurt again, you do need some more help in that room. So I went with Brian Thomas Jr. to the Jags because I think it makes the most sense at this pick for them. They can use pick 44, 45, whatever it is, on a corner, or they can go defense. And then that could make some sense. So I sided with the Jags fans here and gave them Brian Thomas Jr. And also the Titans adding L'Jarius Sneed and teams in the teams defenses in the division got better. So undoubtedly this gives the Jags offense a chance to match that energy. Amarius Mims to pick 18, arguably the most athletic tackle in the draft, has the most upside in my opinion. Also has the least experience, which is why he's pick 18, but I think he's a great opportunity to plug him in. He gets to stay at right tackle, which is kind of what he's more used to. And then you have Orlando Brown Jr. on the other side, which gives you more versatility. He's super athletic. I think this is a good move. He can develop into an amazing player. Pick 19, again, don't got to spend much time on it. Byron Murphy, is the pick. Obviously, he's not Aaron Donald. He is the best nose tackle in the draft. Someone who can slide around that interior and cause a ton of havoc and hopefully help them not miss too much of a beat with Aaron Donald no longer being there. Pick 20, Adonai Mitchell is the pick to the Steelers. They can go in a couple of different directions here. They could go offensive line, they could go corner, but to me, they have a glaring need at receiver. You have George Pickens, you have Van Jefferson, and who else, right? So they need someone they could pair outside to pair with George Pickens, and they have Russell Wilson on a kind of prove it strange deal where they're only paying him, a couple bucks to be quarterback there. And if Justin Fields is the future beyond that, then you need to start adding talent for him as well. So I think that makes the most sense. They have to go receiver, in my opinion. Pick 21, Talise Fuanga is the pick to me for the Dolphins. The Dolphins are in this weird spot where they had some players go down on the offensive line. They rotated some guys. They lost, some talent there. So to me, Talise Fuanga is a guy who can plug in and probably go to right guard or play right tackle for you. I mean, he can move around. He's one of the most versatile players. I know the evaluation on him is he could definitely play tackle. He could do that very high, at a high level, but I think he'd be a really phenomenal guard as well. He is a mauler. He is a body mover, and they desperately need more players like that to protect Tua and that electric offense. And the only way it stays electric is if Tua stays upright. So I have them go offensive lineman here. 22, Terrion Arnold. The Eagles are doing backflips. In my mock, they tried to trade up, but they wanted to trade up to 17 so they could go snag their corner. But the Jags were like, we need to take Brian Thomas here. So I had them not trading. But regardless, they still get their guy. I think they probably should still consider Jackson Powers Johnson. But in this case, they get a talented player who really should not fall to 22. If we're talking about Terrion Arnold, he's a top 15 talent in my opinion, but there's the fall. Another fall. At pick 23, the Patriots are using their second first-round pick that they got from the Vikings in this year's mock draft trade, and they take Laiatu Latu, edge rusher out of UCLA. This, to me, makes a ton of sense. We considered wide receiver, but there's a couple of guys that it felt like a little bit of a stretch to maybe take a Xavier Worthy or something like that. So I went with an edge rush help, which I think they desperately do need to add to that. They had okay production out of that defensive line led by Matthew Judon, but they need somebody opposite of him to really add some layered production there. And if Laiatu, and he has time to get healthy, he doesn't have to rush onto the field with this Patriots team. He can take his time. So I really like that pick for them. And I think that adds some serious talent. Pick 24 was maybe the easiest pick of the entire draft outside of Caleb Williams, which was Troy Fautanu, offensive tackle from Washington. He is a plug-and-play starter, losing Tyron Smith, and that is a huge W for Cowboys Nation. Cowboys fans should be really excited about that pick because Troy really could be a top 15 pick. He really could. I just don't think that he's necessarily better than some of the other four tackles. Amarius Mims also has a larger ceiling, and he's also a starter at right tackle, which is really what the Bengals need. So I think that makes sense. Pick 25, the Green Bay Packers desperately need interior offensive line help. They desperately need left tackle help if we're also keeping it a buck. David Bakhtiari is no longer there. They signed Andre Dillard, which is supposed to be their stopgap at left tackle or maybe just some depth. That's a terrible idea. Rashad Weaver, which I believe is their current starting left tackle. Don't quote me on that, Packers fans. But regardless, their depth chart is looking mighty empty for the interior. Graham Barton is a guy who not only can come in, play right guard for you, but he can also move around the offensive line. If you wanted to start him at left tackle and see what he could do for you, he could probably get you some production there too. So that gives the Packers a ton of versatility and a ton of depth across the entire offensive line, if we're being honest. And I think he's just a great player. So Graham Barton, the first true guard that's taken here. Pick 26, Cooper DeJean is the player to Tampa. Now, when I was doing this mock draft, I almost immediately regretted not giving them Chop Robinson. And I think that Chop could very well be the pick here. However, I think that Cooper gives the Tampa Bay Buccaneers some much needed versatility in their secondary as well. Obviously, I forget the player's name, but they traded one of their starting corners to the Detroit Lions. And at corner and edge, to me, are the biggest areas of need for the Buccaneers. I think if one of those top receivers were still here, then they would obviously consider them, but I don't suspect they're going to fall. So they're just going to take the best corner or edge, in my opinion. So Chop is probably the player I would take in this case for the Buccaneers, because I think they could use some edge help, but I don't think taking an extremely productive and an extremely versatile defensive back is necessarily the worst thing for them either. 27 is the Cardinals, and they are taking Jermaine Johnny Newton, a true nose tackle, a true defensive tackle who is going into a base 4-3 defense. And this is why I went Johnny Newton over like Kool-Aid McKinstry, for example. They desperately need some corner help. They just signed Sean Murphy-Bunting, who's looking like cornerback 1 for the Cardinals. He played very well for Tennessee last year. I love the signing for the Cardinals, and I think they need to add cornerback help. They're probably going to do that with their next pick, I would imagine. Maybe a TJ Tampa, a Kamari Lassiter in the second round, but they go Johnny Newton here because they need 2 starting defensive tackles. This is a base 4-3 defense, which means that interior defensive line needs help, and they have, you know, a couple of guys who are just okay. You know, they just have like kind of like a below average defensive. Their defensive line kind of needs help everywhere, to be honest. But I think Jermaine Newton arguably could be the best nose tackle out of this draft, and we'll see. I think it's a good pick for them. Buffalo Bills go with wide receiver Keon Coleman from FSU. Keon Coleman is, you're hot or cold on him. You either think he's a really good player or you just don't think he's a first round pick at all. Now, to me, Keon Coleman does one thing very, very well. It's the opposite of doing a lot of things good, but nothing great. He does something really, really great, and some of those other things he's missing in his game. And to me, Keon Coleman is able to kind of replace the contested catch ability, if you will, of Gabriel Davis. And then you're also down Stephon Diggs. So this is a Buffalo offense that is screaming for help. They need weapons. Keon Coleman at this point, I think, is a better pick than like Xavier Worthy or maybe Ladd McConkey, who I think could swing into the first round, because I think that he gives you some contested catchability, which you don't currently have on the team, in my opinion. So Keon Coleman is the pick. Buffalo fans, don't hate me, but I think it's an okay pick. I'm higher on Keon Coleman than I think consensus is. Consensus has him as like wide receiver 8 or something like that, and I think that could be the case. But to me, as a true big body playmaker, I think he gets better at the next level, and especially if the tutelage is good for him, he could learn to kind of expand his route tree, and he's not just like a go up and get it guy. He has some big playability, and I think that he can do that for a good offense and help them out a lot. Pick 29, Detroit. The most Detroit player I could possibly mock in this spot is Kool-Aid McKinstry. I am very, very excited about Kool-Aid. I think he makes a ton of sense here. Easy pick for me at 29. Pick 30, the Baltimore Ravens would have loved maybe Keon Coleman. I think he would be a good fit in the offense. I don't know that Xavier Worthy is necessarily the guy you want to go with, but it could make some sense just adding some additional speed. Having Zay Flowers and Xavier Worthy, I think that kind of makes their offense a strangely one-dimensional like air raid. So I don't love Xavier Worthy in that spot, but I could see it. But to me, you lose some pretty good production from Jadeveon Clowney being a double-digit sack guy off your defense. He goes to Carolina. So you take Chop Robinson here, you add to the defensive power, and hopefully it doesn't skip a beat. You just plug Chop into the spot where Jadeveon Clowney was. Pick 31, Nate Wiggins is the pick for me for the 49ers. I think it makes a ton of sense. They need some depth at corner. They are pretty solid everywhere. I tried to plug them in an offensive lineman, but honestly, their depth is really good. Like their guys are graded pretty highly, like just referencing PFF, for example, and just watch the eye test as well. This is a good offensive line. They could probably plug in some depth there, maybe even add some talent, but I think Nate Wiggins is a really, really good player, and as a cornerback 3 or 2 on that team is like insane. I think that would be a really good addition for them. Pick 32 is surprising. For some reason, the Chiefs, no Chiefs Kingdom, no fans, no analysts are talking about the hole at left tackle that the Chiefs have. Currently on their roster, they do not have, they have one left tackle on their roster, and it's like some guy who's played 100 snaps. right? One of their draft picks from like a year or two ago, or 3, whatever. The point is, they need a left tackle. Now, whether it's like Jawan Taylor who could move over there, maybe you do some offensive line gymnastics and figure that out, that's probably the case. I'm not overreacting. I'm just saying, like, Tyler Guyton is a guy you could draft here and literally just plug that one need that you have on the offensive line and boom, be done with it. Andrew Wiley apparently is no longer on the roster, who I think started at right tackle, and I think Jawan Taylor started at left tackle for them. Again, Chiefs fans, don't burn me to the stake here. I could be wrong, but based off of my analysis, there is a need on the offensive line, whether it's at right or left tackle. So to me, you get Tyler Guyton, he could play either of those spots for you and add a level of production. Again, I could see the Chiefs going wide receiver here. Xavier Worthy would be interesting in kind of like a really fun gadget offense. And then, maybe you go, different, like Ladd McConkey would be a really interesting pick here as well. I would love him as a weapon that would just be absolutely something to really fawn over with Mahomes throwing the ball back there. So they could go a couple of different routes, but when I was evaluating the roster, Tyler Guyton makes a ton of sense here as the top tackle available. Patrick Paul, maybe. Kingsley Suamataia could potentially be a guy that you look at, but they need a tackle. So that's it, guys. I'm going to wrap it up. This one went a little longer than I would have preferred. If you watched the whole thing, you're a stud. I appreciate you. But this is the full breakdown of my first round mock draft for all 31 teams here. Let me know what you guys think. If you're a fan of a different team and I had this pick here, talk to me in the comments. Let me know what you guys think about the pick. And let me know what you guys think about the trades as well. I tried to break down the compensation and have that make as much sense as it possibly could. But yeah, guys, just one day away from the 2024 NFL Draft. This one is exciting. Let me know what you guys think. Drop me a like. If you're not subscribed to the channel, whether you're a Titans fan or not, I would really appreciate your sub. And other than that, we will see you in the next one. And, one last thing. We will have a reaction podcast on the Glory Day Sports channel. So if you're not subscribed, go to the Glory Day Sports YouTube channel, drop a sub. Every Thursday morning we have pods, the Morning Glory show on Thursdays at 7 a.m. Central. But this week, obviously, we are going to be reacting to the first round. So we're going to be doing a show on Friday the 26th, which is my birthday, at 7 a.m. Central. So make sure you stop in and hear what we have to say about the Titans' first round selection. But from that, guys, I appreciate you so much again. Thank you for checking it out, and you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Get hype about tomorrow. We'll see you in the next one.